I want you to try something right now. Just sit still for a moment. Take a normal breath in through your nose. Now breathe out slowly through your mouth. Did you feel that? That slight resistance? That wet, rattling, almost gurgling sensation somewhere deep in your throat? Like something is sitting there blocking the path, refusing to come up and refusing to go down? Now be honest with yourself. How long has this been going on? A few weeks? A few months? Longer than you want to admit? And here is the part that probably frustrates you more than anything else. You have tried coughing it up. You have tried clearing your throat so many times throughout the day that your throat is sore from the effort itself. You have tried drinking hot water. You have tried steam inhalation. You have stood in the shower with the water as hot as you could stand it, breathing in the steam, hoping that this time it would finally break loose. And for a few minutes, maybe it feels a little better, a little clearer. But then an hour later, there it is again, sitting in exactly the same spot, heavy, thick, immovable, like it owns that space and has no intention of leaving. You have probably Googled this more times than you can count. And every result told you the same vague, unhelpful things. Drink fluids, use a humidifier. It is probably just a cold, but it is not a cold. A cold comes and goes in a week. This has been with you for weeks, months, maybe longer, and nobody seems to be able to tell you why. Here is what I need you to understand right now. And I mean really understand, not just hear and forget. That mucus is not meaningless. It is not random. Your body does not waste energy producing something for no reason. Every single persistent symptom your body generates is a signal. It is a message being sent from the inside, trying to get your attention, trying to tell you that something specific is happening beneath the surface. The mucus is not the problem. The mucus is the response to the problem. And until someone helps you identify what your body is actually responding to, you will keep treating the surface and getting nowhere. And this is what I see over and over again in my work with adults, especially those over 50. This symptom, persistent mucus that just camps in your throat and refuses to leave, is one of the most dismissed, most trivialized, and most poorly investigated complaints in everyday medicine. People are told it is nothing. They are told to just live with it. They are given a generic antihistamine and sent home. And the actual root cause, the thing driving the entire problem, sits there unidentified, unaddressed, and fully in control. Today, I am going to walk you through 6 specific research-backed reasons why mucus persists in the throat for weeks and months at a time in adults, particularly those over the age of 50. And I am going to do something I think you genuinely need. I am going to explain which 3 of these 6 causes tend to show up together. Because they almost always do. They feed into each other, they amplify each other, and when they combine, they create a cycle that no amount of throat clearing, no amount of hot water, and no amount of steam will ever break on its own. My promise to you is the same one I always make. Clear language. No medical jargon left unexplained. Real studies, real mechanisms, and practical steps you can begin applying today. Not eventually, today. Before we go any further, I want you to do something for me right now. Drop a comment and tell me this one thing. When you feel that mucus most, is it thick and stuck, or is it thin and constantly dripping? Just write stuck or dripping, because your answer to that one question tells me an enormous amount about which of these 6 causes is most likely running the show in your body right now. I read every single comment. Write it now. Let us begin. And I am starting with the one cause that, in my experience, catches the most people completely off guard. Because it has nothing to do with your throat, nothing to do with your lungs, and everything to do with what is happening in your stomach while you sleep. It is called laryngopharyngeal reflux. And if you have never heard that term before, you are not alone. Most people have not. But once I explain what it is, I suspect a very large number of you watching right now are going to feel like someone just turned a light on in a room you have been stumbling around in for months. You know what heartburn feels like, that burning sensation behind your breastbone, usually after eating, usually when you lie down. That is standard acid reflux. It is obvious, it is uncomfortable, and because it is so noticeable, people seek help for it relatively quickly. But there is a completely different version of this condition, a silent version, one that produces no burning at all, no chest discomfort, no obvious digestive symptoms of any kind, and yet it is doing something very specific inside your throat every single night. Here is what happens. At the junction of your esophagus and your stomach sits a muscular valve. Its entire job is to close after you eat and keep stomach acid locked safely below. But as we get older, this valve weakens. It loses tone. It does not seal as tightly as it once did. And when it fails to close completely, acid escapes upward. Not just into the lower esophagus, which is where heartburn happens, but all the way up, past the esophagus, into the back of the throat, onto the larynx, onto the vocal cords, and sometimes even higher, into the nasal passages. Now here is why this matters so much for mucus. Your esophagus has some tolerance for acid. It was built with a degree of protection. Your throat was not. Your throat lining is delicate, thin, sensitive, and when even a trace amount of acid touches it, your body launches an immediate defense. It floods the area with thick, sticky mucus, coating the tissue, shielding it, trying to prevent the acid from causing direct damage. This is your body being intelligent. This is your body protecting you. But the result, for you, is that you wake up every morning with a throat full of thick mucus and absolutely no understanding of why it is there. Because there was no burning, no pain, no clue pointing you toward your stomach. Clinical research published in otolaryngology journals has documented this extensively. Up to half of all patients with laryngopharyngeal reflux experience zero heartburn. Their only symptoms are chronic throat clearing, morning mucus accumulation, a hoarse or rough voice in the morning, and a persistent feeling that something is sitting at the back of the throat. Sound familiar? Ask yourself this: is your mucus dramatically worse when you first wake up? Does it take an hour or more of being upright and moving around before your throat starts to feel clearer? Has anyone ever told you that your voice sounds different in the mornings? Rougher, weaker, lower? These are the hallmarks. And when I get to the full action plan at the end, I am going to give you the exact steps to take tonight that directly target this. One more critically important detail here. If you regularly take over-the-counter pain relievers for aches, joint stiffness, or chronic pain, particularly non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs like ibuprofen or naproxen, published research has clearly established that these medications erode the protective mucosal lining of the stomach. That makes reflux, including the silent variety, significantly more likely to develop and significantly harder to control. If this describes your situation, that is a conversation worth having with your doctor at your very next visit. Before I continue, take a second and tell me your name and where you are watching from. I go through the comments personally, and I genuinely want to know who is in this community. Because number 2, and this one operates so quietly and so gradually that most people living with it have stopped recognizing it as abnormal. They think it is just how their body works now. When you imagine sinus problems, you probably picture the worst-case scenario. A face full of pressure, a pounding headache behind the eyes, a nose so blocked that breathing through it is impossible, that full-blown sinus infection that announces itself unmistakably. But in a very large number of adults over the age of 50, chronic sinus inflammation does not announce itself at all. No dramatic pain, no visible swelling, breathing through the nose feels mostly fine, and yet, beneath the surface, the sinus lining is quietly swollen, mildly inflamed, producing a slow, constant, barely noticeable excess of mucus. And that mucus has to go somewhere, so it drains, silently, continuously, down the back of the throat, hour after hour, day after day, without ever being dramatic enough for you to think of it as a sinus problem. This is post-nasal drip, and clinical research has confirmed it is one of the most prevalent causes of persistent throat mucus in adults in this age group. One 2024 study documented that the average age of patients presenting with this condition was precisely 55 years old. This is not a coincidence. This condition belongs to this phase of life. Here is where most people go wrong. They go to the pharmacy, they buy antihistamines, and they take them for weeks, sometimes months, waiting for the improvement that never fully arrives. Antihistamines dry mucus. That is what they do. But they do nothing about the low-grade inflammation inside the sinuses that is producing the excess mucus in the first place. You are mopping the floor while the tap is still running. And worse, dried out, thickened mucus that is now stuck to the back of your throat is often more uncomfortable and more difficult to clear than the original thinner drip ever was. What the research consistently supports is something remarkably simple and affordable. Regular nasal irrigation with a warm saline solution. A 2025 clinical review published in the journal Medicina, which examined evidence across a wide range of upper respiratory conditions, concluded that nasal irrigation is an effective, safe, and low-cost intervention for both treatment and prevention. It works by physically flushing inflammatory mucus from the nasal passages, reducing swelling in the sinus lining, and supporting the natural clearance system that moves mucus along your airways. The very system that, as I am about to explain, slows down significantly with age. But the single word that separates success from disappointment with this method is consistency. One use will give you one clearing. 2 uses will give you 2. That is not the point. The point is daily, sustained, committed practice over weeks. That is when the real change happens. That is when the inflammation begins to recede and the baseline production of mucus begins to drop. I will walk you through the exact technique in the action plan. If you are still with me and this is making sense, type the number 2 in the comments so I know you are tracking with me. And if you have not subscribed yet, now is the time. Your support allows me to keep making these videos. Cause number 3 is one that most people have genuinely never considered, and it requires me to take you inside the biology of how your body handles mucus in the first place. Because once you understand this system, everything else about persistent throat mucus becomes dramatically clearer. Your airways, from deep inside your lungs all the way up through your throat and into your nasal passages, are lined with millions and millions of microscopic hair-like structures called cilia. These tiny structures are in constant motion, beating in coordinated rhythmic waves millions of times a day, without you ever feeling it or knowing it is happening. Their job is to sweep mucus upward and outward, keeping it thin, keeping it moving, making sure it never pools, never thickens, never accumulates long enough to become that heavy, sticky, impossible sensation sitting in your throat. In a younger person, this system runs beautifully. Mucus is produced, swept along, and cleared almost as fast as it appears. You never notice it because the system handles it before it ever becomes perceptible. But published research has confirmed something critically important. As we age, particularly after the age of 50 and accelerating beyond 60, these cilia slow down. They beat less frequently. They become less coordinated with each other. And in some people, the cilia themselves begin to shorten or thin out, reducing their physical ability to move mucus effectively. What this means in practical terms is profoundly important. Mucus that would have been swept completely clear of your throat in seconds at age 30 can now sit there, pooling and thickening for hours at age 60 or 65 or 70. You are producing the same mucus, or in some cases even slightly more, due to the other causes we are discussing. But the clearance system that used to handle it seamlessly is no longer keeping up. This is not a complaint about aging. This is simply the reality of human physiology. And understanding it is essential because it means that any factor that pushes your body to produce even a small amount of extra mucus, whether it is silent reflux or sinus inflammation or dehydration or anything else, is going to hit you harder and last longer and feel worse than it would have 20 or 30 years ago. The safety net that used to catch everything is no longer there. And this is the foundation that every other cause I am describing sits on top of. Now, I mentioned earlier that 3 of these 6 causes tend to show up together. Here is the first combination I want you to understand. Silent reflux, irritating the throat at night. Postnasal drip, adding mucus from above during the day. And slowed ciliary clearance, making it impossible for your body to move any of it out efficiently. These 3 operating simultaneously is one of the most common patterns I encounter. And when they combine, they create a cycle that no single remedy can touch. The reflux irritates the throat, the postnasal drip adds volume, and the slowed cilia cannot clear either one fast enough. So mucus accumulates, thickens, sits, and becomes the constant presence you feel from the moment you wake up until the moment you fall asleep. If that pattern sounds like your life, you now understand why. If this is clicking for you, type the word cycle in the comments, because understanding that these causes stack on top of each other is genuinely one of the most important things you can take from this entire video. Cause number 4, and this one requires me to go through your medicine cabinet with you. Not literally, but conceptually. Because for a surprising number of people watching this right now, the very medication that is protecting your heart or controlling your blood pressure may be the thing that is making your throat miserable. There is a widely prescribed class of blood pressure medications called ACE inhibitors, angiotensin-converting enzyme inhibitors. These drugs are enormously common, they are effective, they serve an important medical purpose, and I am absolutely not telling you to stop taking yours. But they carry a well-documented class-wide side effect that the medical literature describes in very clear terms. These medications cause a substance called bradykinin to accumulate in the body. And in a significant percentage of users, studies report between 5 and 35%, depending on the population studied, that accumulation triggers persistent throat irritation, an ongoing sensation of mucus or phlegm, and in many cases, a dry, nagging, persistent cough that simply will not resolve. Here is the specific detail that causes this connection to be missed repeatedly. The side effect does not appear immediately. It can take weeks, sometimes months, sometimes even longer. So if you started a blood pressure medication 9 months ago and your throat started acting up 6 months ago, the gap between those 2 events can be wide enough that no one, not you, not your doctor, ever connects them. They seem like completely unrelated developments. But that exact delayed onset pattern is precisely what the research describes. A large study involving over 27,000 patients found that adults over the age of 65 had a 53% higher likelihood of experiencing this specific side effect compared to younger patients on the same medication. This finding is directly and immediately relevant to this audience. If you take a blood pressure medication and you are not certain whether it falls into the ACE inhibitor class, your pharmacist can answer that question in less than a minute. It is a simple, straightforward question. And if it turns out that you are on an ACE inhibitor, there is an entire alternative class of blood pressure drugs called ARBs, angiotensin receptor blockers, that manage blood pressure equally well and do not carry this specific throat-related side effect. That conversation with your prescribing doctor is one of the most valuable 10 minutes you could spend. Type the word medications in the comments if this one is making you think, because I see this connection missed constantly, and I want you to be the person who catches it. Cause number 5. And this one is going to feel counterintuitive at first, because it sounds too basic, too simple, too obvious to be significant. But I promise you the physiology behind this is far more important than most people realize, and it is doing more damage to your throat comfort than almost any other factor on this list. It is dehydration. Chronic, low-grade, barely perceptible dehydration. Your mucus is primarily water. Its consistency, whether it is thin and fluid and easily moved, or thick and sticky and glued to the back of your throat, is directly determined by your body's hydration status. Think of it this way. Imagine a fresh flowing stream, clear water moving easily over smooth stones. Now imagine that same stream in a drought, reduced to a trickle, thick, stagnant, barely moving. Your mucus behaves the same way. When your body is well hydrated, mucus stays thin. It moves easily. Your cilia can sweep it along without difficulty. When you are even slightly dehydrated, that mucus thickens. It becomes sticky, resistant. It clings to the walls of your throat, and your already slowed cilia simply cannot generate enough force to move it. Now here is the age-related detail that makes this a genuine medical concern and not just a wellness platitude. Research has established repeatedly and conclusively that the thirst mechanism deteriorates with age. At 30 years old, you feel thirsty well before dehydration reaches any meaningful level. That early warning system is robust and reliable, but in adults over 50 and increasingly beyond 60, that signal becomes blunted, delayed, unreliable. You can reach a level of dehydration significant enough to visibly affect your mucus, your energy, your concentration, and your kidney function without ever feeling particularly thirsty. Your body has stopped warning you, and because it has stopped warning you, you do not drink. And because you do not drink, the dehydration continues. And because the dehydration continues, your mucus stays thick, day after day after day.